Well, that brings us to the second half of the show, the thing you've all wanted to see, the reviews. And we'll start off with two documentaries, actually. First, we're going to talk about MoviePass, MovieCrash, the documentary that a lot of you should be familiar with, the MoviePass, which allowed you, if you paid, I think, 10 or at one point $20 a month, you could go to see as many movies as you can and they'd pay for it. I know I had mine. I unfortunately don't still have my card. I know Andre had one too. And this movie focuses on exactly what happened that made it go out of business in the first place. And even though now it is making its comeback under the original leadership that it started with, I like this documentary because when you think of MoviePass, you think it's open and shut. But now you find out everything that was going on behind the scenes that makes it more interesting. And it's not just having to deal with money. You're dealing with, two, I guess, generally this was a black owned business at first. And basically they realized the scope of it, maybe they couldn't handle. So that one of their business partners gave it to another businessman who claimed he was part of the marketing team that made Netflix so big, and found out, yeah, he didn't have that much actual involvement in it. And basically, he hired another guy who we find out only had experience coming up with ideas for products, but none of them were ever that big. And basically, they just blew through the money and were using all this kind of glam, like business deals, like having Dennis Rodman be at Coachella with them and having this big party to try and convince people to buy MoviePass when MoviePass was selling but wasn't maintaining what they were spending. And that is really why it went out of business. But it also kind of tells this tale where that two black businessmen who had good reputations behind them, they couldn't even market their own company only because a lot of white people wouldn't invest in their company because they were African American. But soon as they got white faces in front of who also had questionable, who themselves had more questionable backgrounds, they got all the money and loans that they wanted. And so I think, if anything, like, though I liked Dumb Money as a movie, this would have been a more interesting, sort of the same kind of movie, because now you have race playing into it. Plus, you have the haves versus the have-nots, and just coming down on business and the way they do it entirely. What did you think of MoviePass, MovieCrash?
I really enjoyed it. It was also one of those documentaries that you come out of it very angry, and I was very angry watching it. Again, I had a movie pass just like you did, and no doubt, I think it did change the industry because after that, AMC, Alamo, they started instituting their own little like reward stubs, and you pay to see only this couple movies a month, and you get enough points, you get free popcorn, free whatever, free ticket to the next movie you see. I think MoviePass definitely played a part in sort of ramping that up with the theater business. Now, I agree with you. I mean, this really was a story not so much just about this business product that had its rise and fall. It's a story about racism in business, period. Again, these two reputable guys who actually were part of Urban World and formed Urban World because they couldn't get their movies in Sundance and took it that next step and had this idea that actually was really good on paper. Nobody wanted to do it because they're black. And then you get two white guys to do all the real work, and then they end up kind of stealing the product from them and fucking it up in the process. And just to see like where it was going, where they're like producing the Gotti movie with Travolta and going to Sundance and throwing parties and really trying to like make this a bigger thing and then completely screw it up. it was really satisfying at the end to find out that at least one of the founders was able to buy it back, while those two guys wound up, now they're potentially facing jail time over that and other matters that they were involved in. And particularly one guy who was like doing all those businesses that didn't work out. He looked like one of those guys
Ted
that,
Farnsworth. And
yeah, he looked like he was kind of like one of those like pyramid scheme dudes that was kind of like trying to sell you on, oh yeah, we can improve your financial life, and all you have to do is just suck in more people to mooch off of with their business. And I hate that shit. I've been there, and it fucking sucks. So I am one that really, I not only highly recommend it, I think anybody that's into business or wants to get into movie making should absolutely see this movie, because it definitely is a valuable learning lesson in, first of all, not letting your skin color determine your success or failure in business. You should be able to persevere, and not let the quote unquote man try to fuck you over. That's the biggest lesson that I take away from this documentary.
I agree. And Stacy Spikes or Hammett Watt, if you ever want to come on and guest star on the
Oh,
show,
absolutely.
we would love to interview you. It is directed by Muta Ali, and it is on Max.
Max. Yep.
Yes, you can catch it on Max, and we both give it a high recommendation. Next, we have another infamous documentary that recently came out, directed by Andrew McCarthy. It is called Brats, and it is Andrew McCarthy. Realistically, it's about Andrew McCarthy coming to grips with being part of the Brat Pack, even though he's only mentioned mildly in the article. But basically, tracking down other people who I guess were considered part of the Brat Pack, and seeing, I guess, how it affected them and their careers even to this day. And he actually gets the exclusive of finding the writer of the article and questioning him about this. As a person who grew up with the supposed Brat Pack films, even though I was younger than all of them, I looked forward to this documentary. Andrew McCarthy was one of my favorite members of the Brat Pack, and I recently had read his autobiography, Brat. This is basically just an extension of that. It doesn't go as in depth into his personal history, but here he gives an overview, and he tries to track down all the people who are considered part of the Brat Pack. Obviously, he doesn't speak to everyone that we would want him to talk to, but he talks to Ali Sheedy, talks to Emilio Estevez, Rob Lowe. He talks to the adjacent to the Brat Pack, Don Cryer, Leah Thompson, Howard Deutsch, Deutsch, sorry, whichever way, I'm sorry, however you say his last name. But unfortunately, we do not get the names we want, like the Molly Ringwalds, the Judd Nelsons, Mayor Winningham.
Michael Hall.
No, who he did ask, but he declined to be in it. But I mean, and Demi Moore. The interviews are interesting, but it just seems like most of them are past it. They were like, yeah, it happened. Okay. But I went on with my career. And he even talks to Timothy Hutton, because he saw Timothy Hutton as a peer, but whose career he wanted to emulate, since he had a Best Supporting Actor Oscar and was working his way to directing even in his 20s. It would have been interesting if he would have went after somebody like Sean Penn to ask him, like, how did you stay out of, being typecast, so to speak? Molly Ringwald declined to be in it, and the film, for a documentary, ends on a cliffhanger as to whether he finally got in touch with Judd Nelson. And to me, the most notable thing about this film is what they build the trailer around. Just how uncomfortable Emilio Estevez looks with having him in his house and just questioning him about it, even though he claims, yeah, you're the reason why I'm willing to talk about this on camera. And if Emilio does not look like his father, I don't know what to tell you. You are the father, Martin Sheen. But the documentary, it's an interesting look, but it's such, I guess it's such a soft punch, It just feels like anybody could have done this type of documentary if that was what it was going to be. And I understand maybe some of the participants were testy about how they're going to come off, so he couldn't go too in depth into it, but it ends up rather like a disappointment. It's sort of like an in-name sequel, that doesn't go any of the places you were hoping or answer really too many questions that you were hoping would be. Andre, what did you think of Brats?
I got a lot of thoughts, but first off, on the off the bat, I liked it. I think
Okay.
um, there were some good interviews. There were definitely some good insights. I was glad that they were able to talk Emilio and Andrew about the Woodstock movie they didn't make, and Emilio kind of clearing up that aspect of it. And yes, getting other people that weren't in the Brat Pack but were big at that time, and then to end it with David Blum, who wrote the New York article. Um, so there's all of those things that I really liked, and some of the archive footage. They even show, which I never saw before, behind the scenes of the original ending of Pretty in Pink, when it was supposed to be Molly Ringwald getting with John Cryer's character instead of Andrew McCarthy. That I had not seen before, and I was actually pretty shocked that they actually had that footage.
Okay.
Um, Now, in reassessing it, though, there are those points you brought up and others that have come off now that it's kind of fresh in our minds. It definitely felt bitter in a lot of aspects. I mean, for somebody that says he's kind of made peace with the whole Brat Pack moniker, and how it's become this term of endearment among fans, the way he comes off when he's doing these interviews, it still seems like his premise is that it was this bad thing that affected all of our careers. It took all of our careers in a direction that shouldn't have gone. And the way he's bringing out the questions, it seems like, he's trying to elicit some sort of reaction of, like, was this really bad for you? And only really Emilio was the only one that, yeah, that was like a very uncomfortable conversation. And the way he was kind of coming off, I've kind of been in those certain conversations with people that maybe you haven't seen in a long time, and then it gets a little bit uneasy, and then it's like sort of like that awkward goodbye kind of deal. That's what that reminded me of. And then with everybody else, with Rob and Demi and Ali, everybody was more chill about it. They were kind of like, yeah, we weren't crazy about it at the time, but we're doing great now. I mean, there were actually gifts that came out of that article and the whole like us being all kind of tied together, which is one of the reasons why I feel those actors now all still work, all are still healthy. They've all had their trials and tribulations personally and professionally. And so to be at the point that they're at now, where they've had some memorable performances, memorable films, and are still active today, even somebody like Ali Sheedy, who had her health issues and her substance abuse problems, and then made a comeback in indie films in the '90s, is still a miracle in itself. To see this guy complain about the state of his career, but yet you had Class, you had Samuel's Fire, you had Pretty in Pink, you had Mannequin and Weekend at Bernie's. You had some bangers, you had some successes, and people who still look at you as somebody that, like, oh yeah, I love the work you did there, and I kind of want to emulate you in the films that I did later on. I mean, it's not like you got stuck with one role and that's all you ever had in the rest of your career. Why the fuck are you complaining about a freaking article that only mentioned you once and didn't necessarily like tear you down? You still were able to work after that. You did some Showtime movies back in the '90s. That didn't hurt you. You work with John Frankenheimer. Okay, you should not be complaining if you've worked with John Frankenheimer in your career, dude. So I like I feel like he really did not know where he wanted his career to go. I don't even think he really wanted to be a star. I think he just wanted to be a character actor, and this thing just blew him up to a whole nother level. Which then leads me to the ending with the David Bloom interview, where David Bloom's trying to explain why he created that moniker and his journalistic integrity and all this other stuff. And if you really look at it, here's this guy kind of like laid back, explaining his backstory. And oh yeah, it really didn't do anything for me, just it was a cool thing to do at the time, but it's not like, all of a sudden I was gonna be writing for the Washington Post or something like that. And you're seeing Andrew McCarthy just like he's seething, like he's ready to like jump up and throw his fist at this guy. And then even at the end, when it looks like maybe David Blunt's kind of like calmed down to the point where it's like maybe he has a little bit of regret about maybe his stuff kind of affecting their careers in a negative way. You would think maybe McCarthy would be more understanding, but says like, couldn't you have been a little bit more nicer? That to me didn't come off right. So I recommend it. I do like it, but I do feel like, okay, there's been this rumor now they might be doing a San Elmo's Fire sequel. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think you can get all those guys together in the same room unless the money is good and the script is tight. Obviously, it's not a secret cow. You can't get Joel Schumacher because he's dead. Somebody else would have to take it over. But I don't see them all getting back together unless like one of them dies and they get nostalgic about it. And I don't want that to happen. But I just think that McCarthy, you got to calm down, dude. You have a good career, and you actually do pretty well with documentaries and with your photography work and write your books. Just let it go.
Well, I feel like he also did it because it's probably something he, even with his other work, still just gets asked about. So it's like, let me just put out the definitive answer right through this,
Therapy
So
session. This was his therapy project. He was trying to like make peace with the past, like especially seeing if you've read his book, he had his problems. He did cocaine. He was a horrible drinker, and kind of blaming all of that on the state of his career and the issues he was having with his father, which I think would have been just as compelling to get into than just, oh, how did everybody else feel about the Brat Pack thing? No, let's talk about you, dude, because that's where I think this is the source of the problem.
well, it also didn't help that it's you like usually when a documentary is being made, it takes years to make. This felt rushed, like he
Yes.
just thought of it a few months
You
ago.
can tell it was shot during COVID because all the shots where you could see the crew and they're wearing their masks, it seemed like they didn't have enough time. Like maybe you could have waited for Judd Nelson a little bit. Maybe he would have been
Exactly.
open.
Exactly. And I felt like maybe they should have given it a little bit more time before coming out. I just feel like maybe give it another year. See if you could have gotten those other interviews. Like, okay, you can't get Anthony Michael Hall. Maybe Molly will change her mind. Maybe you could get Judd Nelson. Maybe Mayor Winningham's willing to talk. People like that, even though, again, she's more Brat Pack adjacent. But I mean, John Cryer being filled in. I mean, at least he kind of had his kind of time to speak about like, yeah, me and you didn't get along when we were making Pretty in Pink. And most importantly, no Spader, even though you have vintage footage
Yeah.
of him.
And he directed episodes of The Blacklist, so they do talk. Why is he not in this? I can understand Robert Downey Jr. I mean, he's busy, and Tom Cruise. I know was kind of brought up, but that article mentioned a lot more people than they let on. Steve Gutenberg was mentioned as a member of the Brat Pack, Ralph Macchio, and even Sean Penn. Like, there's a lot of missing pieces here. They only focused on the names we know, and then Anthony Michael Hall, like I said, he wasn't in it, but he's not mentioned. Period. That's crazy.
Well, I mean, he turned down being in it, so maybe Andrew McCarthy was like, "Let me not even mention him in any way, shape, or form."
It must not have been a pleasant conversation.
Probably not. I mean, if we're gonna do that, find Elon Michael Smith, who's working as a medieval professor. If we're gonna talk about people who are adjacent, that's a kind of more of a even interesting documentary. Talking to people who were in like monumental films when they were teens and kind of went away from the limelight and went to like normal life. Like find Never Ending Story, Barrett Oliver. You know.
Well, there is a documentary coming out about Neverending Story.
Oh, okay. Because I was gonna say these are maybe that would have been an interesting tie-in to all of that. You know, like how do you get past, something you were infamous for in your teens, and try to come to grips with it, live a normal life, or still have a life in entertainment. But they won't. But I guess the powers that be won't let you get past those infamous roles. Just saying, that could have been an interesting also aspect. I like I said, I give it a mild recommendation, and you give it a recommendation, so passable. Now, the next one we're going to talk about is Hitman, directed by Richard Linklater and written by Glen Powell, the star of the film, and Richard Linklater, based on an article by Skip Hollingsworth. I'll let you talk about this one first. And
Okay, so Hitman is not what you expect in the title. He's not an actual killer. He's a school teacher who gets used by law enforcement to nab people that are looking to kill their loved ones or whoever. Like when a hitman gets hired, they get hired usually in private. So he's always wired up and pretending to be an actual killer, and then things go wrong when Adriana Jonah is this woman that I guess she wants her husband killed or some, I forget.
yes.
Yeah, and but in this case, he falls for her, and it becomes a conflict of interest where he actually now has to hide some dirty deeds from the very people he works with. Um, Mild recommendation. I like the movie. I can't say that I loved it. I think Glen Powell is a talented actor. He's got a hell of a career ahead of him. He definitely has those movie star chops. So I'm glad to see him really play a character part. And I'm a big fan of Retta. I like Retta on Parks and Recreation. She's very funny, and it was cool to see her in this and the kind of banter she has with him. Who played the cop again? The one that ultimately got killed. Spoiler alert.
That was, I think, Austin Amilo. Uh,
Okay, yeah,
that's Jasper, right?
yeah. He was very good in it. I liked his character. I actually love to hate his character. Um, and Adrian Jones is incredibly sexy. I mean, she really works here too. So again, I'm not gonna say that I loved it. It was kind of dry at points. There may have been some dull parts, and even some of the romantic stuff where we're trying to, I guess, play up his Glen Powell's hunkiness. But overall, good story, fine entertainment. My recommendation.
I really like this film. I give it a high recommendation, but because it matches Richard Linklater's style of kind of being laid back but pushing forward throughout. I will say, watching the film, it feels like each act is a different film in of itself, though. Like the first part is kind of a like workplace comedy, then it becomes this kind of romantic comedy where there's a big secret. Then the third act, it becomes a full out film noir, but not like, you know, I guess not like one of those edge of your seat film noirs. Again, it's more laid back, but you wonder how they gonna get out of this one. And I really enjoyed the film. I enjoyed each, I guess, film that they presented me with. Glen Powell's obviously a star, though I feel like he added the line towards the end when his college students at first are, oh, he's so boring, he's so nerdy. Then towards the end, one of the girls like, when did he get sexy? And I'm just like, he still looks the same. So it's like, I feel like Glen Powell wrote that for himself. But his chemistry with Adria Arjona, oh my God, it's off the chart. She is the ultimate femme fatale in this film. And I guess, considering they tell you it's based on a true story, you're shocked kind of the twist it takes, because we've been taught in films, good characters don't do that, so that's why I found it kind of interesting where the characters go. I mean, I guess because of the likability of the characters, you get the ending that you get. That was the only place where it felt a little like, really? But I agree with you about Retta. I thought she was like a breath of fresh air her banter. Sanjay Royal as the other kind of nice cop who works with Gary. I give this. I know you and my friend are both have your like little qualms with this movie, but I loved it. This is like Richard Linklater is back. Kind of. It's not one of his more experimental films, but it's just one of those that makes you have a smile on your face, kind of like Bernie. Whereas Bernie worked because you were just shocked Jack Black played this type of character. Here, you can see Glen Powell obviously easily playing this role. But I like the fact that most of the cast is barely people you recognize, so you believe the characters more rather than, oh, that's Phil Morris playing a character role in this, or somebody you know. Like, really, Retta's the most recognizable person other than Glen Powell in this movie.
And Rudder, please come on the show if you ever watched this.
Oh, yes, would love to talk to you. I love Parks and Rec. So, and that is our review of Hitman. Now we go to the blockbuster. We're out of the indies. So our next film is a franchise that me and Andre both love. It is Bad Boys Ride or Die. Even though, interestingly enough, this should have been Bad Boys for Life, and the last movie should have been named Bad Boys Ride or Die. That takes place with Will Smith and Martin Lawrence back on another case with Will's illegitimate son included, because now they are framed for murder and being dirty cops, and they have to prove their name. And since Martin Lawrence's character has a heart attack during the film, he goes through a spiritual conversion where he feels like he can't die. And Will Smith's character even kind of slows down and gets married to a woman in this film. And we're also dealing with Joe Pantoliano's character's daughter, who's a U.S. Marshal, and his granddaughter, who is close with the family, and how they're dealing with them being on the run. It's, again, directed by Adel and Bilal, who directed the last movie. I like this film. I don't think it's the best of the franchise, but I mean, we're on the fourth one. It can't be super fresh. But for the most part, I enjoyed it. This is a film, just check your brain at the door. Just enjoy what you're seeing on screen. Best to watch with a crowd for their reactions also. Like I said, it's not my favorite. Bad Boys 2 is still my favorite. But I think this is worth watching. So I give it a recommendation. I'm not going to give it a high recommendation, but I give it a middle of the road recommendation. I don't think you'll be bored. You can't go wrong with it, though it is supervised. I will say that. And again, we lose kind of a franchise character that we've grown used to, and kind of one we was introduced in the last one that I didn't mind seeing go. Spoiler, I didn't mind seeing DJ Khaled get killed. I'm like, good. And the only other thing I guess I really have to say about, I mean, as always, the villains are kind of disposable in this. So Eric Dane, it's just like, okay. It's like, it just felt like one of those like blaxploitation movies where it's like, of course the villains have to be white, And I will say, Paula Mendoza, hello, she is looking hotter in this film than the last film. And I know they got rid of Charles Griffin. He's not even mentioned in this. And Vanessa Hudgens is in it too. But like I said, I give it a middle of the road recommendation. How did you feel about Bad Boys Ride or Die?
I had fun with it. I agree with you. It's not my favorite in the series. I honestly, I like the last one that came before this because I thought the story was pretty compelling, at least in terms of evolving Will Smith's character. Now, I will say there's a lot of things to like. So, Dylan Bilal stepped it up on the action. There's a lot of great stuff, especially the POV shot near the end with the guns, and the behind the scenes of how they did that with Will and Martin controlling the cameras when they shot that whole sequence was pretty mind blowing. And the Reggie moment was a holy shit moment that just tore down the house, and to see that payoff was really satisfying to see. And I was glad. Listen, the plot, I will say, is a bit convoluted. I think they were trying to stretch it to tie back to the first two movies, and it was sort of like what they did with Spectre, where they were trying to tie in all the other, like all everything that happened in Casino Royale till now was all part of a big setup against Bond. They were trying to do that here, and it was a bit muddled, but at the expense of bringing back Joe Pantoliano for that whole thing with the video he made before his death, and then having the dream flashbacks of him, seeing these guys when they're sort of like between life and death, was fun to see. It was always nice always to have Joey Pants back in there. Um, so those are like the positives, the action, and of course the dude who played the Armos guy, Jacob Scorpio, how do you say his last
Yeah.
name? Um, Badass. He had some great moments, especially in the prison yard. Like he really showed he was a kick-ass dude that could probably potentially carry a picture on his own, which is surprising that they didn't spin him off like they kind of hinted at the last one. Um,
Hmm.
but overall, those were like the things that I like, and the chemistry with Will and Martin. You don't think about the slapbacks as much, except for one scene, but it's a funny scene that actually plays. But you can never really go wrong with the Bad Boys movies. Now, the things I didn't like, and there's not much. Overall, it's fun. I agree with you 100% on the villains. The villains were weak. And I think the way Eric Dane looked, I think Mel Gibson should have done it. He looked so identical to the not so likable Mel Gibson that we have now that I think he would have actually not only been better, but it would have been an event to have the dude who played Martin Riggs going after Will and Martin's characters. That would have been sick. And I think maybe we would have saved Mel's career, to be honest. Um, the jarring casting change with Martin's wife from Teresa Randall to Tasha Smith. So we both saw this at Alamo, and when she had the first scene with him, there was a couple sitting right next to me on my right. They're like, "That's not his wife." And I knew this is going to be a problem. I mean, it's not going to kill the movie, but people are going to start having questions. I mean, we're now 4 movies in. Now you decide to change the wife. There's got to be some explanation for that shit. And hopefully, Teresa Randall is doing well. We don't know. There have been some rumors about her health and other issues she might be having. So I'm hoping she's all right. Um, and yeah, like the stuff with the daughter of Captain Howard was a bit of a stretch too. They had to throw that in there at the last minute for the Jeopardy. Even the fact that they had Will get married to some random chick they just added, giving him emotional Jeopardy. I'm like, no, I kind of want to see where it was going to go with the chick that becomes the captain. I kind of like, there was a dynamic there that they could have played off. If there's a fifth one, maybe they could add to it. But nitpicks aside, this was fun. I stack it with the other four, and the other 3 movies, and yeah, recommendation. Not a high one, but entertaining and still consistent with all the others.
Well, I feel like with the Tasha Smith, that maybe that was why we didn't see her that much in the film. Like,
Yeah, she was downplayed here.
yeah. With Rhea Seahorn, I think as the U.S. Marshal, I think that felt like a last minute addition. Like, we got the girl from Better Call Saul. Let's like beef up this part of the movie. So let's cast her there.
And I hate to say, she looks too old to be his daughter.
That's why during the movie I think we both got getting confused. Is that his daughter or his wife?
Yeah, right off the bat, I thought it was his wife.
Exactly. So it's like he has a daughter now all of a sudden, and she's a U.S. Marshal, and like I said, the Reggie scene, that's a standout. That's going to be a classic from this film. Like I said, mild recommendation. I agree with the Mel Gibson thing. You might, if you're going to dress somebody up as them, why not just get them?
Yeah.
The next film, I felt like the second villain, Ian Ruffeld, I thought he was only there to kind of give the captain something to do rather than just be in the background.
Yeah, it was obvious where that character was going.
Exactly. And I mean, if they need a plot line, kill Will's wife, and he's seeking revenge. And that's where he falls into the arms of the captain. You know,
Honestly, I thought there was going to be a twist where the wife was tied with the villains.
I so did I. I was like, is this gonna be bulletproof? You know, because again, when the girl comes to the house and she's nowhere to be seen, and the phone keeps ringing, so I thought that was gonna be the big reveal. Like, I've got the little girl, ha ha ha. But like I said, you know, we'll see. Because since this movie made bank, they're obviously gonna make another. So next, we move on to, oh, well, it's an independent film. Sorry. Another indie for you guys. But I saw The TV Glow, written and directed by Jane Schoenbrunn. Now, me and Andre have not talked about this film, or I have not gotten Andre's opinion about this film yet, because I absolutely love it. If you follow me on any form of social media, you know I've been tooting the horn for this film since it came out. So, Andre, I will let you introduce this film, and then you tell us what you thought of the film.
So I saw TV Glow. That was Justice Smith, right?
Yes, Justice Smith.
Yeah. So he is. Well, he starts out as a kid, and he's obsessed with this TV show that's kind of along the lines of "Are You Afraid of the Dark" on Nickelodeon. And supposedly, everybody who sees the show gets a little too obsessed with it that they're just like consumed watching this entire series play out on an old VHS tape, and then freaky stuff starts happening. Um, Really hard to describe. I know the director was talking about dealing with being queer, being trans, and that's kind of like the metaphor of what this film is. No, I didn't hate this movie, believe it or not. I thought visually it was stunning. It's creepy as hell. I think it's very well acted, and I love the cinematography, the moodiness, um, and I like the subversion aspects of it. I think the biggest problem, and this is why I'm just like, I don't hate it, but I'm not going to give it like the highest of high recommendations like you might. It's just I felt like it was inconclusive at the end. I just felt like I wanted this to go someplace where there was a solid, definitive ending, and I don't think we got that.
Okay. Um, well, for me, I love this film. This, I guess, maybe as being someone who growing up was obsessed with these shows, and that was like the thing I was into, and also feeling excluded when I was growing up. I could identify with the characters, because really the pink opaque, the two main characters bond over the show. Maddie, the older one, the girl, she's obsessed with it and introduces him to it, which it's too late for him to watch as a kid. So he runs off and has these secret sleepovers with her. And then as they get older, one day she just disappears. And, he's kind of left on his own. And then not too long after, his mother dies of cancer. And he's stuck with his father, who he doesn't really get along with, played by Fred Durst of the Limp Bizkit. And after that, Maddie comes into his life again later in life and tells him where she was. And she says she was in, the show in real life. And then he can go too if he wants to be happy, follow her, but he has to agree to be buried alive. And this all ties into the television show. This is one of those chances where we could give spoilers, but I'm not going to, because I think this is a movie everybody needs to experience on their own. Because like their previous movie, We're All Going to the World's Fair, this deals with, I guess, kind of childhood or teenage obsessions and it coming into life and changing up narratives. And I think this film is very powerful. For those of people who might know director Greg Araki, it's kind of like his film, only a little bit by way of David Lynch, with the visual style and, most of the characters being teenage and it being somewhat nihilistic to a degree, but also kind of hopeful. Because this is a film I feel like different people read different things into. But basically, if you've ever felt like an outcast or an outsider, you'll be able to identify in some way or aspect with this film. And obviously, for the director who is trans and queer, this is kind of semi autobiographical because growing up, that was the only time they felt like a connection was through more pop culture things. And that was how they expressed themselves, or that was their dialogue. That felt more real to them than what was going on in reality around them, but knowing that they were different than everybody else. So I just highly recommend this film. This is a must see, and I will go on track as saying, so far, this is still my favorite movie of the year. And that's how much I love this film. So it gets a very high recommendation for me. And it made me actually appreciate Justice Smith and his acting all the more. Mm. So that is I Saw the TV Glow, a recommendation from Andre, and an over the top recommendation for me. And we reach our last movie, which we just saw recently, the third in the X trilogy. We saw Maxxxine, written and directed by Ty West, and starring Mia Goth, Kevin Bacon, Halsey, Lily Collins, Elizabeth Debicki, Moses Sumney, Giancarlo Esposito, and Bobby Cannavale and Michelle Monaghan, and produced by Peter Falk. And Kid Cudi is one of the executive producers. Watching the credits, I discovered. And he, of course, starred in the first film. This is the third and maybe last in the trilogy. Wink, wink. But this basically continues the story more from X. We now find Maxxxine character is still porn actress, but is trying to break into mainstream films, being in a hit horror sequel. And really, they make it seem like all this is happening during the production of the film, but primarily most of the story goes from her audition process to her first day of filming, and how she got there. This is a movie like a Tarantino movie that wears all of its influences on its sleeve. You can recognize like where it's coming from. And I like that the 80s sleaze aspect is played up in it. My only qualm is I don't think it's the best of the trilogy. I think it's actually the one I like the least out of the trilogy. I still like the film, but I just think the other two were a little bit stronger in their story and presentation. Because also, this kind of feels like a television show that's going off the air. So you get a bunch of celebrity cameos in it, and you're thinking, oh, they're going to last. And it's like, oh, they're here for one scene and they're gone. Like, really, the only big names who stick around are Bobby Cannavale, Michelle Monaghan, and Giancarlo Esposito. Everybody else has like maybe one or two scenes and they're gone. Oh, and Elizabeth Debicki, she's in it for longer. It's kind of cut and dry. The mystery isn't really there. You kind of suspect who might be behind this the whole time. So it wasn't really like I'm guessing, except for one scene where there was a guy in a ponytail holding a video camera and had two hookers in a closet. And I was like, they're going to reference Don Simpson? That I got excited about. Unfortunately, they did not. But like I said, I enjoyed the film for what it was. Kevin Bacon was a hoot with his gold teeth and trying to bring back that wispy mustache from Quicksilver. Obviously, he was having fun. I kind of wish there was more of him in the film. Moses Sumney created, a memorable character as the video store clerk, but he telegraphed his death with his Rambo knife he kept having on him. And I really wish Halsey was in it more. I even wish Lily Collins was in it more, So it kind of felt like almost like Ty West does Scream 3, only better. So that is my impression of Maxxxine. What did you think of Maxxxine?
I absolutely agree. It's the weakest of the trilogy with X and Pearl, but it doesn't make it a bad film. It's just, it is vastly different. Like, if you're going in expecting it to be another slasher horror thing, it actually backs off of all of those elements, even though there is still some gore and some, slasher moments. I think it really takes a lot of influence from Brian De Palma, from Body Double to Dress to Kill, and other movies that he had during the period. Blowout is also another thing I think about. So those are the things that I see. And again, Mia Goth is great as usual. I'm glad one thing that Ty West said that they considered, but they decided to pull back on was there was supposed to be more of a supernatural element where Pearl was still haunting Maxine, and thankfully they said
Yeah.
no, we're not going to keep going backwards like that. We're just going to keep pushing forward. Now the twist and the ending was kind of expected. Um, Actually, there was one I thought maybe it was going to have like a Taxi Driver type of ending the way it went. So there is still kind of a question mark about that, but I think it's pretty obvious. It's a safe way that they went out. Um, all the characters that they brought in, now that it has a bigger budget and it's more Hollywood driven, I thought everybody was fine. Elizabeth Debicki was fine. Kevin Bacon was great. Bobby Cannavale, anybody could have played that part. It didn't have to necessarily be him. Um, it sucked that the black dude in the video store had to get killed off. That was like what the fuck. But I think that's why you also had Giancarlo Esposito in there to try to be, the guy, the cool agent that actually does make it through and does a pretty cool thing towards the end to help out Maxine. So he ends up not being, a scummy kind of character that you would normally see in a movie like this. And I think it perfectly captures 1980s Hollywood and
Oh
all
yes.
the laziness, and you know you have the glitz and the glamour of the period, but then you have the underbelly that was reminiscent of the times. If you ever watch movies like Hardcore or Vice Squad, which is also another inspiration, definitely check out our Gary Sherman interview about that. And um and the music was hot. The music is used in the right spots. Not everything in the trailer was used, but definitely what we had works effectively for the film, especially the use of St. Elmo's Fire's track Man in Motion by John Parr was really awesome. Um, yeah, I mean, the little nitpicks here and there, but otherwise, I really did like this one for a fact.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about what you said. Like, yes, this doesn't really feel like a horror film. This feels more like a thriller, or even in some ways a mini action film. For the reveals. My thing was, I just felt like the reveal at the end, that should have maybe had a been like, I guess maybe I'm going the Scream way. That
Yeah,
should have been like a big name, like, oh, it was this. I guess sort of like it's Agatha all along, you know. And Toby Huss, I'll shout out, who has a minor role in this film. Like, I would have even accepted him as the big bad at the end. I like that it kind of gave you an expectation with the literal ball busting scene in the beginning, but then that's the goriest it really gets, throughout the film. You're thinking, oh, it's going to be like X with all these gory, shocking kills. And it's like, no, that's pretty much the most shocking you're going to get. And obviously, him being dressed up as Buster Keaton and all these shots of us seeing a guy dressed up as Charlie Chaplin, that is definitely a reference to the movie Angel, where those characters play a significant role in the movie. But like I said, I enjoyed it for what it was. It's definitely something I would say see it on the big screen, and especially if you have a love of 80s sleazy type of movies, definitely go see it. But I give it a recommendation. I have a few nitpicks like you, but nothing that I'd say, oh, it ruins the movie. So that ends this episode. Um, Obviously, we pretty much agreed on most of the films. You should definitely check out all six. And that ends our business this week. But as you know, we always have unfinished business. And I have to ask, have you seen A Perfect Getaway with Mila Jovovich and Steve Zahn? If not, why not? Because it's fucking awesome. And Andre, what movie would you recommend for the people?
well, in honor of the late Robert Town, have you seen the 1974 film The Yakuza starring Robert Mitchum and Ken Takora? If not, why not? Because it is fucking awesome. And directed by Sidney Pollack.
Yes, another excellent film. And with that, we bid you adieu until next time.
If you like this review, please be sure to like and hit subscribe to be alerted to new episodes in the future.